Begin today the Gemara on Daf Tzadik Aleph from it base towards the bottom of the Amud, where it says Hahu Gavra, about 7-8 lines from the bottom of the Amud. The Gemara is bringing different stories when it comes to collecting a loan in different kinds of situations. Rav and Rabbi Bachame are arguing in all kinds of cases. So now Hahu Gavra, there was a story with a person, the Zavna lo Kesubos ime. He sold the rights of collecting his mother's Kesubah for a very small price, because not necessarily will it ever be his to collect that he's selling this to someone else. It'll only be his if his mother passes away. Well, first, if the father passes away before the mother, so now his mother has a right to collect the Kesubah, then his mother's going to pass away, and now he, as a Yerush, will be able to collect his mother's Kesubah. So that right he sold to someone else. So because it's not something that will necessarily happen, so he sells it for a very small price. Now, Valmalei, he tells the individual that he sold the rights of this Kesubah to, Im Asya Eim Uma'arara, if my mother will come and will be Ma'arar, she'll challenge the sale, Loi Mafzinulach. I'm not going to pay you back, I'm not going to reimburse you. What happened? Shchiva Imei, so his mother actually passed away, and V'lo Yirada, she never challenged the sale. Now he's the one that yashins from his mother this Kesubah. Now he himself came, and v'kamar, he himself is coming to the buyer and is challenging and saying that this is my Kesubah. I want to collect the Kesubah for the rights of my mother. Just like I told you that if my mother would come and would challenge the sale, that I'm not going to reimburse you. So now I'm coming in the place of my mother and I am challenging the sale and I want to take it and collect it for myself. Could he do this? So Rami Bachama thought to say, so this son is taking the place of the mother, just like the mother herself. He clearly said that I will not reimburse you if my mother challenges the sale. So now I'm coming in the place of my mother and want to collect the Kesubah for myself. So Rava says, no, you can't do this. Even if he did not accept upon himself the achrayis, the responsibility, if his mother comes and will challenge the sale, but achrayis didei milay kibel, but his own achrayis, if he himself is going to challenge the sale, did he not accept that upon himself? He's the seller, and now he himself is coming to challenge the sale. For that, he will have to reimburse him. So Rashi here explains that the truth is that he could be mevatel the whole sale, because really this is not something he could sell at all. This is what's called a situation where a person is selling a dovar shaloi bala olam. This is something that he doesn't even have yet to sell. He's saying, in the event that I end up getting this Kesubah from my mother, I'm selling that rights to you. He doesn't have that yet. So really, it's not a sale that will go through. That's why he could be mevatel the sale. At the same time, though, the money that person paid for this, he's going to have to reimburse, because for sure, he himself to challenge the sale, if he wants to go back on the sale, he's going to have to reimburse. He only said that if my mother is going to come and challenge, then I don't have to reimburse. But if he himself is going back on the sale, that he does have to reimburse. Another case, Amar Rami Bachame. Rami Bachame said, Reuven shemacha sada l'Shimon. Reuven sells a property to Shimon. Shaloi b'achrayis, and he makes it clear that he's not taking any responsibility to what happens. If any of the Baal Chayiv of Reuven will come and want to confiscate from this property to get paid their loan, I'm not taking any responsibility to reimburse you. Now, v'asa Shimon that bought his property went umachra l'Reuven, and he sells it back to the seller. He sells it back to Reuven, and here he sells it b'achrayis. He did take responsibility that whoever will come, if a Baal Chayiv will come to collect from it, he will reimburse Reuven. What happened? V'asa Baal Chayiv de Reuven. Now Reuven's Baal Chayiv, the original seller's Baal Chayiv came the katarev leminei, and he came and went to grab away the field for his chayiv that was owed by Reuven to him. So now the point of here is, Reuven said to Shimon, I will not reimburse you. Shimon said to Reuven, I will reimburse you. And now the field's being taken away from Reuven. So seemingly Shimon should reimburse Reuven for this. And Reuven does not have to reimburse Shimon for anything, because he's clearly said, I'm not going to reimburse you. He didn't take responsibility. So therefore, Rami Bachama says, Dinuhu, the halacha is the ozl Shimon umachzile. Shimon has to go and he has to reimburse Reuven for this Baal Chayiv, even though it's Reuven's own Baal Chayiv. But nevertheless, it doesn't matter. When Reuven sold it to Shimon, he did not take responsibility. When Shimon sold it to Reuven, he did take responsibility, so he's going to have to reimburse Reuven for this Baal Chayiv that's taking away the property now from Reuven. So Rava again argues with Rami Bar Chama, and Rava says, Nihi, the Achrei is the Alma, Kibbul Aleh. Yes, it's true that Shimon took responsibility when he sold the property to Reuven. But what did he take responsibility for? If there's any other outside Baal Chayiv that will now come to collect from this property, let's say if Shimon had another Baal Chayiv that he owed money to that's not going to come to this property to collect from it. For that he took responsibility. But Achrei is the Nafshei, Mi Kabbalah Aleh. But did Shimon accept responsibility for Reuven's own issues, for the fact that Reuven himself owes money to his Baal Chayiv, and therefore it's being confiscated from Reuven now? That Shimon did not take responsibility for. So therefore, he will not have to reimburse him, even though he took responsibility. However, the Gemara says, even though Rabbi here says Shimon will not have to reimburse him, but if the case will be slightly different, then he will. And that is in the case of Beruvin Sheyorash Sodem Yaakov. If this field that Reuven sold to Shimon, the same like the story before, as the Gemara will spell out the story again, but with this one detail here, that Reuven inherited this field from his father Yaakov. And then Shimon Shalei B'Achrayis, like the story was before, he sold it to Shimon, not taking any responsibility. And then Shimon sells it back to Reuven, taking responsibility for what will happen. And now, the Baal Chayiv, someone that Yaakov, the father of Reuven, the original owner of this property, came to collect a loan that he was owed by Yaakov. So over here, Rava will agree that Dinuhu, the Azal Shimon Amaftzilei Minei. Over here, Shimon will have to reimburse Reuven for this Baal Chayiv that's taking away the property from Reuven. My time, what's the reason? Baal Chayiv, the Yaakov, Baal Chayiv, the Almedami. So true, Rava Taka says that Shimon only takes responsibility for an outside Baal Chayiv, not Reuven's own Baal Chayiv that's now confiscating this property. But over here, the father of Reuven, who Reuven inherited this field from, is considered to be an outside Baal Chayiv. The fact that it's Yaakov, the father's Baal Chayiv, that's coming to take away the property from Reuven, that's an outside Baal Chayiv that Shimon does have to take responsibility for this. So Rashi explains, the Chiddush over here is that we do not look at Reuven as sort of a continuation of the father. He Yarshin from the father. Rashi brings the expression of Bra Kara Davua, that I could say that the son is just like a limb of the father, and therefore if it's Yaakov's Baal Chayiv, that's equivalent, it's the same like Reuven's own Baal Chayiv, which Shimon did not take responsibility. So we don't say that. Yaakov is Yaakov, Reuven is Reuven. So if Yaakov's Baal Chayiv is now confiscating the property of Reuven, this is something that Shimon will have to take responsibility for, even according to Rava. Amar Rami Bar Chama, another halacha Rami Bar Chama said, Reuven shemach sadol Shimon b'Achrayis. Reuven sold a property to Shimon, and he took responsibility for what will happen here. Now, the Zakav Olav b'Milveh. Shimon didn't have money to pay for the property yet, but he bought it, and the sale went through. It's fully in effect. He made a kinyan, and the money that he owes for this property, so they established that as a separate loan. They wrote down a star separately that now Shimon owes money. He's a Baal Chayiv. He owes money to Reuven. Now Reuven passes away, and then what happened is Va'asa Baal Chayiv de Reuven. Now there was somebody that Reuven owed money to, and that Baal Chayiv came v'katarif le Shimon, and he wanted to confiscate the property from Shimon that he bought from Reuven. This is a property that is a lien on this property to him. He is a Baal Chayiv. So what happened? What did this buyer do? What did Shimon do? Upaisei bezuzi. He went and he paid this Baal Chayiv that wanted to confiscate this property. He went and paid him cash. He wanted to be able to keep the property for himself. So now, why is he doing this? So Rashi explains the reason why he's doing this is he's thinking to himself, what's going to happen over here? Really, again, the Reuven, we're talking, not Reuven, we're talking here about the buyer, Shimon. Shimon is thinking to himself, I owe money to the seller, to Reuven, or now it's Reuven's children that I owe money to because we made a loan. We established a loan when I did not pay for the property. So I really owe them money. Here at the same time, they owe money to this Baal Chayiv that's not coming to confiscate the property. So why should I go and pay them the loan that I owe for this property that I never paid? And then this Baal Chayiv is going to confiscate this property, and they're going to have to right away reimburse me, give me back the money because the property was confiscated from me. So instead of going around like that, let me just take the money that I owe to the seller or now to the seller's children and give it directly to their Baal Chayiv, to the ones that they owe the money to. And that's it. Everything is done. That's what he did. That was his cheshbon. That's how Rashi explains this. But he made a mistake. And the reason is because Dinuhu, the halacha here is, the Amrile b'nei Reuven, the children of Reuven can say now to the buyer, to Shimon, Anan metaltli shavak avun gabach. When the father passed away, we had no karkois, we had no properties anymore available for any Baal Chayiv to collect. And the halacha by Yisayimim is, when someone comes to collect from Yisayimim, if there's no karka, they can't collect anything. So the only thing that they did have here is you, Shimon. You, Shimon, owed us money, cash. So therefore, that's metaltalin. That's the only thing that we had available from the father for this Baal Chayiv to collect. And if it's metaltalin, you don't collect metaltalin from Yisayimim. That's the rule. So again, in the words of the Gemara. So the Bnei Reuven say to the buyer, Shimon, Anan metaltali shavak avun gabach. The only thing that we had now available for our Baal Chayiv to collect is the metaltalin, the money that our father left us by you because you owed our father the money. And the rule is, metaltalin the yasmi leBaal Chayiv loy mishtabdi. And the metaltalin of Yisayimim are not mishubid to be paid up for a Baal Chayiv. You don't collect metaltalin from Yisayimim, only karkais. So therefore, why did you pay for us? Why are you doing us a favor and paying for us the loan for this Baal Chayiv? Don't pay him. The Baal Chayiv doesn't have any right to collect this at all. You're not doing us any favor by paying this. We're not getting anything because anyways you wouldn't be obligated to pay this. So therefore we're not going to pay you back for this, that you paid him this cash, which you shouldn't have. And also at the same time, if he's going to come now to the Bnei Reuven, to the children of the seller, and say, reimburse me for the loss that I had here with this property that I had to pay up, your Baal Chayiv, they're going to say to him, how? How should we pay you back? We have no properties. You want to demand money of us? You can only demand money from Yisayimim from karka. We don't have any karka. So therefore you can't collect anything from us either now, if you want to be reimbursed for this that you paid. So for two reasons, there's no way that Shimon, the buyer, will be able to get reimbursed over here. Again, number one, there's no reason for you to have paid this loan in the first place. And number two, if you want to come to us and collect to be reimbursed for your loss, we have no karkais in our possession to pay you. Yisayimim only pay from karkais, and we have none. So therefore, he loses out. But Amar Rave, on this Rave said, I pikeach idach. If the other one, in other words, if the buyer, Shimon, is smart, so then he could do something to get reimbursed. What is that? Magbi luhu ne'alayu ara. So he owes them money, right? He never, again, going back to the beginning of the story, he never paid for the field that he bought, and therefore it was established as a loan. And now, even after Reuven passes away, he has to pay up this loan. So how is he going to pay up this loan? So he should pay it up with a piece of karka, not with cash. He should take a piece of karka that he owns and pay up with karka. And then, v'hodar govi lo minayu, and that very piece of karka that he's going to pay up to the Yisayimim, so now the Yisayimim have karka available in their possession, and now he could turn back to them and say, reimburse me, pay me back for the loss that I had with this property that I bought, that I had to pay up the Baal Chayiv. So now he could demand to be reimbursed from karka. The only reason why he couldn't be reimbursed from the Yisayimim, because the Yisayimim could say, we have no karka in our possession. But now, he just gave them karka, he just paid them karka. Now they do have karka, so now you can demand that karka back to be reimbursed for his loss. Now, you may ask a simple question, but they only got that karka today. And he's asking to be reimbursed from before. From the fact that he paid their chay from before. The fact that he's giving them karka now, isn't that too late? How could he ask to be reimbursed from this karka that they just received now? So the Gemara says, yes, he can. Rav Nachman, as Rav Nachman said. Rav Nachman says, in the name of Rabbi Baravua, Yisayimim shegovu karka, v'chayves avian, Yisayimim, that when the father passed away, there was no karka in their possession. But then later, they did collect karka because someone owed their father money. So now, Baal Chayiv, if they owe someone else money, that Baal Chayiv could now come, Chayze v'goy v'aysaman. He can take this karka that they just received now and collect from here. So here we see what Rav Nachman is saying is, although when the father passed away, there was no karka in their possession, so anybody that they owed money or their father owed money will not be able to collect from them, because again, the rule is you don't collect from Yisayimim if it's metaltalin. But if later the Yisayimim receive karka from somebody as a payment, now that Baal Chayiv they owe money to could come and take from this karka, even though they just got it now. What's taka the hezbollah for this? So the Gemara in Pesachim speaks about this. One of the explanations for this is that a Baal Chayiv, when they collect their loan, lemafreya hu gaive. What he's collecting is not only considered to be his today, but it's really reveals that retroactively that karka, there was always a lien on it, and therefore it was always his. So it comes out that really the karka that they get now is as if the father had that karka, and as if when he died there was that karka in their possession, and therefore the Balchayv that wants to collect from them will be able to collect from this karka. So over here as well, this buyer, Shimon, if he's smart, he gives them the karka, and then he says, oh, you have karka, and really this karka was always yours, so now I could collect from this karka to be reimbursed from you. Amar Rabbe said another halacha. Reuven shemacha kol sadais of the Shimon. Reuven sells all of his properties to Shimon, and v'chaza Shimon umacha sadachas leLevi. And Shimon went and sold one of those properties to Levi. Now, v'asa b'chayv de Reuven, the b'chayv of Reuven owed somebody money. And the b'chayv of Reuven comes and he wants to collect from any of these properties that he has a lien on them. So obviously he's not going to Reuven. Reuven sold everything to Shimon, but Shimon sold one property of those properties that there was a lien on to Levi. So the halacha here is Ratza mizeh goyve, Ratza mizeh goyve. B'chayv of Reuven could collect either from Shimon, from the properties that are by Shimon, that there's a lien on them, or he can even go to Levi, to the second buyer, to collect from there for the lien that he has for his loan. Now, the Gemara explains when that is true. Usually the rule should be that you go to the first buyer, not that why should you go to the second buyer. But over here, there's a specific case, as the Gemara will explain, why the Balchayv could go either to Shimon or to Levi, to the first or the second buyer. So this halacha here that he can go to either one was only said, Elodezovna Beinanis, if the second buyer, Levi, bought Beinanis. Now, the halacha regarding a Balchayv is, he has the right to collect specifically from Beinanis, not Idis. Idis is for a nizik, and not ziburis, but beinanis, a intermediate, a average level of the value of a field, of a quality field, that is. So beinanis is really his right to collect. So if he sold beinanis to Levi, that again, the second buyer, Shimon, sold beinanis to Levi, so now Levi has beinanis, the first buyer has idis, ziburis, and Levi has the beinanis. So then we say that the Balchayv, if he wants, he can go to the first buyer and say, listen, you're the first buyer, and therefore, as long as there's still properties left by you, even though there's the beinanis by the second buyer, but he's only the second buyer. So therefore, the second buyer could say, I left other properties available for you to collect by the first buyer, so go to him. True, that's why he has an option to go to the first buyer, but at the same time, the Balchayv could go dafka to Levi, to the second buyer, because he has the beinanis. The beinanis is the main shibud that a Balchayv has the right to collect from. This is the case where Rabbi said, Ratza mizeh goyve and Ratza mizeh goyve. Aval, however, Zavne Idis Viziburis, if the Levi, the second buyer rather, he only bought Idis and Ziburis, and he left the Beinanis, which is the main shibud of the Balchayv by Shimon, the first buyer, Matzi Amale, you could tell the Balchayv, Lahachi, Tarchi, Vizvini, Are, Deloy Chaz Yalach. This is why I was very specific in buying Idis and Beinanis, and Ziburis again, Idis and Ziburis, and not the Beinanis. I left the Beinanis for you by the first buyer, so you can go and collect from there. Furthermore, the Gemara says, even also when we say that the second buyer, Levi, bought Beinanis, and therefore the Balchayv of Reuven has the right to go even to Levi, because he has the Beinanis. That's the main thing that a Balchayv collects from. But nevertheless, this is only if he bought all the Beinanis. He didn't leave any other Beinanis available in the possession of the first buyer. Aval ba chavik beinanis dechvasa. If he bought beinanis, but he also left similarly beinanis in the hands of the first buyer, in Shimon's hands, matzi amalei. So Levi could say to the Balchayv, hinachti lecha makim ligbes emenu. I left you space to collect from the beinanis that's in the hands of Shimon. So therefore, why are you coming to me, the second buyer? Because I have beinanis, he also has beinanis. So I'm not any better than him. You should go to him. That's the kavanah of what the Gemara is saying here, as Taisus explains. Okay, so that's the halacha regarding two buyers when a Balchayv comes to collect. Amar Abaye says, Reuven shemacha sada l'Shimon b'achrayis. Reuven sells a field to Shimon, and he took responsibility for what will happen to this field. He'll reimburse him. V'asa Balchayv de Reuven. Now the Balchayv of Reuven comes, v'ketarev leminei, and he wants to confiscate the field from Shimon, from the buyer. Dina who the halacha is the also Reuven and Maftzile. Reuven can come to the Bezdin and he could argue in Bezdin and Taina against this Balchayv that wants to collect this money. He's part of the Ntaira. V'loi Matzi Amalei, the Balchayv cannot turn around to Reuven and say, Lav bal dvarim didiyat, You're not here a party in this Din Torah. Why are you coming to Taina against me? You don't have the right to mix into a Din Torah. Even if you have the best Tainas in the world, but if you're not a Baal Din in the Din Torah, you have no right to speak. I'm now collecting a property from the buyer, Shimon. So Reuven, you're not. I'm not taking anything from you. So therefore, why are you speaking up? So you can't say that. Mishum the Amalei, because Reuven will say, of course I'm a party in this Din Torah. The mafkis minei alai hada. As soon as you take this property away from Shimon, what happens? Shimon will come straight back to me because I took responsibility to reimburse him. So I'm a party in this Din Torah. Vikidamri, others say another version here is afilu shaloi b'achrayis nami. Even if Reuven did not take any responsibility to reimburse Shimon, nevertheless he still can go and argue, and he's a party in the Torah. Because he could say to the Baal Chayv, even though when you take away any property from Shimon, I have no loss in this. I will not have to reimburse him. But nevertheless, it's still not comfortable for me that Shimon should have complaints against me. Look, you sold me a property, and I thought it's free and clear, and here you have a creditor that's coming to collect this property from me. So I don't want him to have any complaints against me. That is enough of a reason that you should become a Baal Din in the Din Torah, and you're allowed to speak up at the Din Torah. Another Allah Abaye said, Reuven sold a property to Shimon. So according to this version, he sold it without taking responsibility for Shimon. Now v'yatzu olav asikin. And now it turns out that there are people that are coming and are challenging this ownership of the property, and they claim that this Reuven that sold this property doesn't belong to him, it really belongs to us. So what happens here with Shimon? Shimon fell into a very bad situation. He bought a property that turns out to be not his. Could he retract from this sale? So now, before he made a kinyan of chazakeh, so he's acquired that it's his, so he can retract from the sale. Once he made a kinyan of chazakeh, so it's too late. He can't retract from the sale. He already made a chazakeh, it was kainit. Now the seller is going to tell him, it's an expression. You took a small sack full of knots, meaning there's really nothing inside of it, and you accepted it. This is the property. You investigated whether it's a good property to buy or not, and you went and bought it, and therefore you made a kinyan too late. And he took the seller took no responsibility, so he doesn't have to even reimburse him. Now, from what point is it considered to be a chazakah? Says the Gemara, when he walks on the borders, when they would set up the borders, and they would exactly where the borders of the field is, and he goes and he walks over there on the borders to set up the borders of the field, that's considered to be the chazakah in the field. There's another version to this halacha of what Abaye said here. Even if Abaye sells it to this person and he takes responsibility, we still are going to say that the buyer cannot retract the sale once he made a kinyan. You could only retract it before the sale, even though the seller took responsibility. So the buyer could turn around to the seller and say, even though I made a kinyan already, but so what? We see that this property doesn't even belong to you, so there I'm retracting the whole sale and reimburse me right away. But nevertheless, the Amalei, the seller, Reuven, can say to him, Achvi tirfach v'ashalom loch. Let's see what happens. Let's let this play out. If this person that's coming to confiscate your property or is claiming that it didn't belong to me, someone's challenging the sale, if they're going to be successful and they're going to actually confiscate the property from you, and you're going to get a shtar tirfa, which is that shtar that we give to a buyer to not come back to the seller and say, here, reimburse me. If this all actually happens, I'll reimburse you then. That was my responsibility I took. But in advance, for me to reimburse you and for you to retract this sale, that you can't do. As Rashi says, many times you have these people that challenge a sale, challenge the ownership of a property, and it turns out that the words that they say is not even true. So therefore, let this play out, and only after the fact, if it's taken away from you, then I'll reimburse you. Person is married to 3 wives. Umeis, and he passed away. So now he owes Kesubos to 3 of these wives. Now their Kesubos was not all the same amount. Kesubos shalzum mana. The first wife, her Kesubos is 1 mana. V'shalzu masayim. The Kesubos of the second wife is 2 mana. V'shalzu 200 mana, that is. V'shalzu shalosh meis. And the Kesubos of the third wife is 300 zuz. Now ve'en shamel mana, but this person only left a property in the value of 1 mana. So the halach is chelkim b'shavet. All of these wives will divide this 1 mana equally, even though the amount of the ksuba that's owed is not equal for all of them, but nevertheless, as far as this amount of the mana is concerned, even the one that is owed the smallest ksuba, it's also a mana. So the shibud of the mana is equal by all of them. All of them are at least owed that mana. So therefore, for that mana, all of them can collect equally from this mana. So each one will get a third from this mana. 33.3 zuz will go to each one of these wives. Ha Yusham Masayim, if the father, the husband, left 200 zuz, so Shalmana, the one that he owes one mana, so she only could collect from one mana. That's what her shibud is on. So Neteles Chamishim, so from that she will get half. She will get 50 from that and divide it with the others, and she'll get 50. Now, the truth is, when it comes to dividing the first mana, it's not clear why the Mishnah says that she'll get 50. You have to divide it between three, like we just said in the previous case. When it comes to the first mana, all three of them have a shibud in the first mana, so you should divide it a third for each. Why does the Mishnah say that for the first mana you get he gets 50? The first one, that is, the first wife gets 50. That's going to be the discussion of the Gemara. Now, Shal Masayim, the one that's owed the ksuba of 200, and the Shal Shalish Meis, and the one that's owed the ksuba of 300. So the second mana is not mishubit to the one that has the ksuba only of one mana. So the second mana could be divided only amongst them. So therefore it's going to come out that each one gets shloisha shal zahav. Each one gets 3 golden dinarim, which means each dinar is 25 zuz. So each one is going to get 75 zuz. Because you take the other 50 of the first mana and you divide it between the other two. So each one gets 25. And then you take the other mana, which is only meshubit to these two. The first one, it's not meshubit to, and each one gets 50. So it comes out that they too will get 75 and 75, and the first one, that her ksuba was only a mana, will get only 50. If the case is that you have, that he left over in the Yerusha properties that are on the value of 300 zuz. So what do you do now? So again, the point of here is the first wife that's only owed one mana, she could only collect from one mana out of those 300 zuz. So Shalmana, the one that has one mana, Neiteles Chamishim. So she gets from the first mana, we divide it into 50. And again, the Gemara will explain why 50 and not a third. So that's divided into 50. So what do we have left over here? So we still have 250 left. The Shalmasayim, the one that's collecting 200 mana, she will get a mana. We're going to take 50 from the first zuz and divide it, and she'll get 25 from there. And then from the other mana, she'll get, from the other leftovers, she'll get another 75, which ends up being a mana. And the Shoshalish Meyais, and the one that is owed 300 zuz, will get Shisha Shalzav, 6 golden dinarim, which is 150 zuz. The Gemara will explain this cheshbon as well. Now the Mishnah concludes, this is the halacha here regarding the ksubis that are owed to 3 wives, the different amounts of 1 zuz, one mana, which is 100 zuz, or 200 zuz, or 300 zuz. So the similar will be the halacha gimel shehitilu lekis. If you have 3 individuals that invested money, they put money into a wallet, into an investment, and each one gave a different amount of money for this investment. Pichasu or haisiru. So if the money depreciated or the money went up in value, so kachen chalkin. So too, similar to what we said before regarding the noshim, that each one is going to get accordingly in their amount, so too over here, the loss or the gain will be according to the amount that they invested. So actually, in this case, Kachin Chelkin is not exactly the same like it is in the case of the Noshim, because when it comes to the Noshim, so when it comes at least to the first mana, where everybody has a shibud in that first mana, the Mishnah says we divide it equally. Only after that, in the additional amounts, more than the mana, which the first one does not have a shibud on, so she can't collect from there. But over here, when the Mishnah says Kachin Chelkin, it actually means that we're going to give the percent of the profit according to the amount that you invested. Regardless of what happens over here, the point is that everyone gets the percent of their money that they invested. That's the profit that they get. So what did it say in the Mishnah? When it comes to them collecting from one mana, so from the first mana, the one that's owed from the first mana, the one that's owed a mana will get 50 zuz. The question is, why 50? Plusin utlasa v'tilsa hudeisla. She should only be getting 33 and a third, like it said in the very first case of the Mishnah, that you do, if there's only one mana, so you divide that first mana into a third for each one of them. So over here when there's two mana, and the first mana has to be split between all three wives, so over here each one should also get a third. Why does it say in the Mishnah that the first one gets 50? So therefore Shmuel says we must say what this is speaking about is Kesubos balas masayim lebalas mana, that the middle wife that's owed 200 zuz, she writes to the balas mana, to the first one, which is owed 1 mana, din udvarim einli imach b'mana. I have no involvement, I'm not going to argue with you regarding collecting from this mana. So then with the first mana, the wife that's owed 1 mana, the first wife, and the last wife that's owed 300 zuz, 3 mana, it's only being divided between them 2. So it doesn't have to be divided into thirds. And that's why it says that the balas mana, gets 50. If that's the case over here, what does it say in the next case of the Mishnah? Shal Masayim v'shal shalosh meyos, that the one that has, afterwards the Mishnah says that the one that was owed 200 and the one that's owed 300, shalosh zav, each one of them is going to get 3 golden dinarim, which means each one is going to get 75. Right? So the first one gets 50. So this is again 50 out of 200. So you still have 150 left. So from that 150, we divide equally that both the balas masayim and the balas shalosh meis get from that 150. They split it. They split it equally, and each one gets 75. But the question is, why do they split the remainder equally between them? Taimala, the last wife that's owed, that is 300 zuz, should say to the middle wife that's owed 200 zuz, ha salkis nafshach mina. Didn't you remove yourself? Didn't you write clearly that regarding any amount from the first mana, I'm not going to collect anything. I'm out of the picture from the first mana. So why are we looking at the remainder of 150 and dividing it equally between these two? We should say that that leftover 50 that's there from the first mana, the middle wife that's owed 200 is not involved. She said, I'm not going to collect from here. So therefore she only has a right to split with the last wife that's owed 300 from the last mana. 1 mana should be split. So the middle wife should really only be getting 50, splitting the last mana. But the 50 from the first mana, she clearly said, I have nothing to do with this. I'm not going to get anything from here. So why are we splitting the remainder of 150 equally between the last two that each one gets 75? And it's the Gemara Mishum Da'amra law, because what the Balas Masayim says back to the Balas Shalosh Meyos is as follows. I didn't really say that I'm going to have 0 rights to collect from the first mana. What I was saying I was saying it to the first wife that wants to collect her ksubah, her mana from the first mana. So I said to her, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm going to allow you to collect your part from the first mana as if I'm not here. And therefore you're going to split it just with the last wife that's owed 300 and keep me out of the picture, so you'll be able to get 50. But she only said this for the benefit of the first wife to be able to get her full 50. But when it comes to splitting afterwards between me and you, the Balas Masayim now has to split it with the Balas Shalosh Meyos. Yes, I do want to get my amount even from the first mana as well. And therefore, we have to look at the total sum. After the first one took 50, now what's left over from the 200? You still have 175. And therefore, you still have 150, that is. And from that 150, we're going to split it equally between us. And I'm going to get 75, and you're going to get 75. That's the pshat in the Mishnah. What did it say afterwards in the Mishnah? Shalosh meyos v'chulu. So the Mishnah continues and says, if there was 300 zuz available for the 3 women to collect the ksubah, so the one that was owed 1 mana for a ksubah takes chamishim, the one that's owed masayim takes a mana, and the one that's owed shalosh meyos gets shisha shel zav, which means 150 zuz. Frek the Gemara, shal masayim mana. The Mishnah says the one that has a ksubah of masayim gets 1 mana. Why? Shiva v'chamishim hu de'isla. She should only be getting 75. Based on what Shmuel said before, that she told the Balas Mana that you can take 50 from the first Mana and I'm not going to take my part in the first Mana when you collect. If so, it comes out that there's really only 150 for the Balas Masayim to take half of. And the Cheshbon is very simple. From the first Mana, so the first one takes her 50. So now, when she comes to divide with the third wife, with the Balas Sholosh Meis, it's the Balas Masayim, and the Balas Sholosh Meis that have to now divide the remainder. So what's here in the remainder? There's 250 really in total. But when we have to really exclude the last 100, because the last 100 is out of her range. That's the third 100, which is above what she's owed B'chlal for her Kesubos, which is only 200. So the last 100, that's going to go to the Balas Sholosh Meis. So therefore, what do we have to divide? Only 150. 50 from the first mana and the second 100. So out of the 150, the Balas Masayim is dividing with the Balas Sholosh Meis 75 for each. So she should only be getting 75. Why is she getting 100? And for the Gemara, so Shmuel explains, because Seves, in this part of the Mishnah, in the last case of the Mishnah, what it's speaking about is, because Seves Balas Sholosh Meis LeBalas Masayim or LeBalas Moneh Din Dvarim Ein Liyamochem. The one that's supposed to get 300, so she writes to the Balas Masayim and to the Balas Moneh that I'm not going to take my portion in the first time you're going to divide the first monah. That's what we're speaking about. So over here, the cheshbon comes out that the Balas Masayim will get a monah. As Rashi over here makes the cheshbon that the Balas Masayim, not like the Reish of the Mishnah. In the Reish of the Mishnah, it's the middle woman, the Balas Masayim. She wrote that I'm allowing the Balas Moneh to take her part and I'm not going to mix in with her. But over here the case is that the Balas Sholosh Meis wrote this, that she's not mixing in the splitting of the first mana. So therefore what comes out is the first mana that they all have to divide equally, because it's in the range of all of their shibud for the Kesubos. So that mana that's divided equally, so it's only divided between the Balas Moneh and the Balas Masayim, because the Balas Sholosh Meis said, keep me out of this. So each one of them gets 50. And then when it comes to the second mana, so who divides over here? The Balas Masayim and the Balas Sholosh Meis divide this as well. And each one of them is going to get 50. So therefore it comes out that the Balas Masayim is now ending up with 100. And then the last moneh, the third moneh, which is out of the range of the Balas Masayim, she doesn't have a shibud that far because it's 300 and her Kesubos is only 200. So there the third moneh goes completely to the Balas Sholosh Meis. That's how she ends up with 150. That's the cheshbon according to Shmuel. Now the Gemara brings another way how to learn the Mishnah. Both of these cases of the Mishnah, where the Gemara had the problem, why is it that the Balas Moneh is getting 50 from the first Moneh that's being divided? So the Gemara brings another pshat in both of these cases of the Mishnah here. Sagt the Gemara, Rab Yaakov minohar pekoid mishmei de Ravina Amar. So Rav Yaakov said in the name of Ravina as follows: Reishe b'shtei tfisos. The Reisha of the Mishnah, not really all the way the very first case of the Mishnah, but it's really the second case of the Mishnah, where it talks about a case where the father left 200 zuz, and he explains it's talking about b'shtei tfisos. What shtei tfisos means is that the inheritance that's available for them to collect for the Kesubos, it came in two different times. First, there was only a certain amount available, and then afterwards there was another amount available. So therefore it was being divided for the money of the Kesubos in two separate times. And the Gemara is going to make the cheshbon in a second. And Sefer, the same thing also with the Sefer, which is the last case of the Mishnah, when in total the Mishnah said there were 300 zuz available to collect for all the Kesubos. So it also came in two times. B'shtei tfisos, there was first certain amount of money or properties that were available, and then afterwards more became available. And as the Gemara will make the cheshbon, it will explain why the first one is getting a money, and it will explain all the details of how we divide the money, the way the Mishnah said it's being divided. So the Gemara explains what happened over here. Reisha b'shtei tfisos, in the Reisha, so there were two times when they're coming to collect, when each one is coming to grab and take their Kesubos. So first, the naflu shivin v'chamisha b'chad zimna. In the beginning, there was 75 zuz that's available to be collected for the Kesubos at one time. So what happens now after 75 zuz available to be collected? So they divide it between the three wives. They all have a shibud in that amount of 75. So each one gets 25. That's how it was divided in the beginning. And then umeya ve'esrim v'chamisha b'chad zimna. And then there's another 125 that became available. So that's what the Mishnah said. The Mishnah said that the total that was available is 200. So first it was 75, and that was divided 25 for each. And now another 125. So what do you do when there's another 125? How are you going to divide this? So for the first one, the Balas Mana, she already got 25. Her shibud for her ksuba at this point is only 75. That's all she's still owed. So out of this 125, out of this 125 that became available now, you take 75 from that, and you again divide it equally between everybody. So everybody gets another 25. So now where are we holding? Everybody has 50. And then there's still another 50 available at the end. And that 50 that's available at the end is divided not with the first one. The first one already got from her share that she was owed. Now, the last 50 that's available out of this 125 is divided between the Balas Messiah and the Balas Shalish Meis, and therefore both of them are ending up getting 75. It's exactly what the Mishnah said. That in the case when there's 200, and now we explain 200 means in two times, first 75 and then 125, that the first one is ending up with 50, and the Balas Messiah and the Balas Shalish Meis are ending up with each 75. Seife, the very last case of the Mishnah, is B'shtei Tfisais. Also, the money became available to collect for the Ksubah in two different time periods. So first, like we said before, the Naflu, Shivim, V'chamisha, B'chad Zimner. There was 75 zuz that was available for them to collect at once. So what happens? So that 75 zuz is divided equally between all of them, so each one has now 25. And then umasayim ve'esrim ve'chamisha b'chad zimna, and there's another 125 that becomes available at 225 that becomes available at once. So what happens now? What do you do with this 225? So first of all, 75 of this 225 has to be divided equally between all three of them, because including the first one, the Balas Mana, which already collected 25, what's the remainder of her shibud of the Ksubah? 75. So from 75 of this 225, that has to be divided equally between all of them, and therefore all of them are getting another 25 from that. So that's why it says in our Mishnah that the first one ends up with 50. And now she's done. But now let's look at the Balas Messiah. When this 225 became available, how much was the shibud that the middle one, the Balas Messiah, had out of this 225? She was not able to collect from all of the 225. It's out of her range, because she's only owed at this point 175. Her original ksuba that she was owed was 200. She already collected 25 from the first time when the money became available, so now her shibud is only 175. So therefore, in this 175, so 75, as I said, we already split between all three of them, and each one got 25, including the Balas Messiah, which also got 25, and therefore the Balas Messiah already has 50. But now there's still another 100 that could be split between the Balas Messiah and the Balas Shalish Meis, and therefore the Balas Messiah will get an additional 50, and therefore the Mishnah says that the Balas Messiah gets a total of 100, and the Balas Shalish Meis gets the other 50, plus the last 50. After we split this 175, there's still another 50 left over, because the total sum that was available at the last time here is 225. So then the Balas Shalish Meis gets 50 that she split with the Balas Messiah, and another 50 in the end, which she doesn't split with anybody, because that was out of the range of the Balas Messiah. So it comes out exactly the cheshbon that the Mishnah said, that the Balas Moneh gets first 25 from the first time the money became available, then another 25 when the money became available the second time. The Balas Messiah ends up getting 100, 25 from the first time, and then 75 from the second time. And then the Balas Shalish Meis ends up getting 150, because the last 50 is out of anybody else's range, so therefore she gets an additional 50 at the end, and therefore she's left with 150. That's the way the Mishnah works, both in the second two cases of here in the Mishnah, the second and the third case that is of the Mishnah, that the cheshbon makes sense if first 75 was made available and then the remainder was made available. Zok the Gemara, now regarding Bechlal, everything it says there in the Mishnah, the way this should be divided proportionally according to what each one has to collect there. So Tanya, in a Braisa we learned, or there's another version there that takes out this Tanya, Zu Mishnah Rab Nosson. What it said here in the Mishnah is the Mishnah's opinion, which is according to Rab Nosson. But Rabbi said, Ein ani roya dvarav shel Rab Nosson. I disagree with the opinion of Rab Nosson. Be'elu, in all these cases, Ella cholkois b'shaveh. All of the wives that were owed money for the Kesubos are going to collect equally. We're not going to say that the Balas Mana only has a shibud on one mana, so she could only divide from the first mana. Then a third mana that's available is out of her range and she can't collect from that. The Balas Masayim could only take from 2 mana, but the third mana, which is out of her range, she can't collect from that. Rebbe doesn't hold to this. Rebbe says, even though it's true that the Balas Mana has a smaller shibud than the Balas Masayim and the Balas Shalosh Meis, but nevertheless, the halacha by Kesubos is that the shibud on the properties of the Baal goes on everything, on all of his properties. Even if your actual Kesubos, the amount, is only a mana, but the shibud is on everything. And therefore, the Balas Mana is able to collect from all of the monies that are now available, not only from 1 mana, but from 2 mana, from 3 mana, and therefore we have to split it equally between all of them, that each one should be able to get from all of the karkais equally. We're not going to say that there's different ranges that everybody has a shibud of their Kesubos. As Rashi explains, this is different than what it says in the end of the Mishnah when it comes to people that are investing money together. And there the Mishnah says that whatever profit or loss there is in the investment will be proportional to what amount of money you put into the investment. Because over there, each one is putting in a certain amount of money into the investment. So it makes sense that each one should get proportionate. But over here, none of these women are actually investing money. So it doesn't make sense necessarily that it should be proportionate. Rather, it's a shibud that they're owed from the husband for their Kesubos. So therefore, Rebbe says that shibud is really equal in all of the karkais, even if the number of the Kesubos is smaller, but the shibud goes on all of the karkais, and therefore, even the Balas Mana could collect more, even that's, so to speak, out of her range, even from more than a mana of the properties, she can collect for her Kesubos.